I didn't realize at the time when I started hosting on this channel I was gonna see a lot of weird things, which again I'm sorry to the viewers if it came to a shock to the regulars. I'm only 5'2" and I can only do so much. But when it comes to mad kings, there's a lot of them throughout history, and I don't know if it's due to mental health or if they just generally thought doing so and such was a good idea. But at least they knew their people would have no choice but to accept their weird decision makings due to fear of death and humiliation. Just like me, accepting every disappointing, inconvenient thing in my life and blasting I'm Going Down by Mary J. Blige. Hi, my name is Jessa, and please join me as we look together our top 10 mad kings from ancient Egypt. Oh, and before we begin, in the last video I was in, top 10 Salem ghost stories that will leave you disturbed, I gave you guys a riddle. Did you get it? The riddle was, what is at the end of a rainbow? The answer is, drumroll please, AW. Your next riddle will be at the end of this video. Anyways, let's get started. Number 10, Pepi II. When you were 6 years old, I'm pretty sure the only responsibility you had was to tell your mom if you wet the bed by accident, or making sure you clean up after yourself, and of course, just being a kid. But for Pepi II, this was a tiny child ruling a massive kingdom. His priorities was to rule Egypt and be the young king he was literally born to be. I mean, hey, at least this 6-year-old has a job, so what's your excuse? Now, keep in mind, this was a 6-year-old and he was obviously at one point going to be extremely spoiled, and of course court members would travel everywhere to impress him with gifts. So one of his court members got him a dancing pygmy from Africa, knowing very well his new young pharaoh was going to freak the heck out seeing him. Pepi was so obsessed and extremely attached to the dancer that he told the man who found the pygmy that he was under strict rules to make sure nothing happens to him. In life, or in death, he better take care of his personal dancer, and when Pepi got older, his demands started getting more like Cusco from the Emperor's New Groove, plus a little bit more inhumane, where he had his slaves stripped naked and covered in honey. He did this because he wanted his slaves to follow him around just to keep the flies away. Either way, he was far the longest ruling Egyptian monarch at 94 years old, and Pepi's rule ended up in economy disarray due to virtually no oversight. Number 9, Pharaohs. There's always going to be P mentioned somewhere when it comes to history's gross weird acts, and I am sorry. Pharaohs was a pharaoh who suffered from blindness, and his father, Xerxes, may have passed it down to him, but of course Egyptian courts official said it was a curse. The assumption of the cause was because when Pharaoh was young, he threw a spear into the Nile River for flooding, and the gods got mad and struck him blind. 10 years later, Pharaohs was getting annoyed at his blindness, and so an oracle told him he can get his sight back if he washes his eyes with the urine of a woman who has never slept with anyone other than her husband. So he did just that. He would try to use his own wives, but it didn't work, which now him and his wife had to go to counseling for potential cheating, and so then he would have to go around town and ask every woman to pee in a pot and pour it into his eyes. Somehow it worked. He found a woman who wasn't cheating on her husband, and he got his eyesight back. He married her on the spot, burned his old wife, and that was that. Of course, it was unlikely that Pharaohs really got his sight back through magical urine, but he just needed a good story to explain his weird habit. Number 8, Cleopatra VII. I will briefly mention her chaotic and absolutely horrendous family in a moment, but Cleopatra VII, or as we know her as only and solely as Cleopatra, she was known not just for her intellect and beauty, but her Twilight love-like triangle relationships with hot bod Julius Caesar and raging wolfman Mark Antony. Of course, there is some debate if whether or not she was a mad king. After all, she was brilliant in using her tactics to ensnare and bewitch the minds and bodies of powerful men in order to ensure the security of her kingdom, but unfortunately her ego did get in the way and lost the battle with Mark Antony, and Egypt then became a province of the Roman Empire, bringing in an end to her reign. But the way she would try to manipulate these leaders would be one for the books. Kris Jenner works hard, but Cleopatra works harder. At one point she needed to seduce Julius Caesar, but she was not allowed at any point to get physical with him, let alone alone with him. So she would strip naked and rolled herself into some bed sheets or rugs and told his servants to DoorDash deliver her to his door. And when they said, "Hey Julius, we got a package for you," they rolled her out of those sheets and she rolled into his, and they gave that delivery a full 5 stars, tip included. But of course, the main reason why she's even on this list is because she assassinated her siblings, including the 2 she was married to, careless about the money like spending $10 to $20 million on a single meal, and of course brainwashing her citizens, believing that she was their goddess and allowing the downfall of Egypt through failed military tactics. Number 7, Xerxes I. He is often portrayed as a tyrant, and it is likely that as a Persian king, his disregard for local traditions did not endear him to the Egyptians. Xerxes I was very much a pharaoh in absentia, where his failed attempts to invade Greece ensured that his portrayal by Greek historians was also seen in a Hollywood extension of the film 300 was not kind. He had a reputation for harsh punishments, womanizing, and draining the Persian Empire's coffers. He built immense palaces and other projects at Persepolis and left his mark on the history of both Europe and Asia. He was more or less a power-driven conqueror. All he wanted was to conquer Greece due to the conflicts his father had started. He would loot, pillage, enslave Persians, but eventually was defeated by Cyprus. Number 6, Pharaoh Psamtik III. I too would send my armies to protect cats, and even though I'm still upset about that one pope who declared people to kill a bunch of cats, this pharaoh seems to be pretty cool to me. Psamtik III, he knew that cats were considered the best, as cats were often associated with Bastet, who is the goddess of fertility, protection, and good health. As a result, it was considered a crime in ancient Egypt to harm or through inaction allow a cat to come to harm. But he had placed the well-being of cats above his own people when Pharaoh Psamtik III literally told his army not to fight because an army commander had released hundreds of cats onto the battlefield. That commander was the Persian king Cambyses II, who, knowing of the Egyptians, loved cats, and his men actually collected a bunch of cats prior to the battle and ordered them to simply walk up to the front gate. The Egyptians, under threat of death from their pharaoh, had no choice but to let Cambyses' men walk straight into the city unchecked. Cambyses' men then methodically slaughtered anyone who dared challenge them using shields with cats to draw on them. Number 5. Menkaure. Menkaure, a pharaoh who ruled in the 26th century BC, definitely had his doubts. When an oracle came to him and told him that he only had 6 years left to live, he was terrified and he did everything he could to avoid it. And he decided he could fool the gods as long as the night never came. Menkaure figured if a new day never began and time could not pass and so he could not die. Right. So every night he lit up as many lamps as he could and convinced himself it was still daytime for the rest of his life. Menkaure would not sleep. He spent every night drinking and celebrating under artificial light, terrified of the moment when his light finally went out. But of course he did not die. Not sure if it was due to his age or the fact that it is not medically recommended to succumb to insomnia, as one would increase a risk of hypertension, diabetes, obesity, depression, heart attacks, and a stroke. He died at the age of 32 and ruled for roughly 18 to 22 years. Number 4. Thutmose I. Although history does call him a great leader as he was able to expand Egypt's empire in Nubia, which today is known as Sudan, as well as his advances in Syria, with his advancements like that also equals to a fair share of violence and catastrophes that affect the very people he plundered and pillaged. Known for his cruelty, which was on full HD display, he found a Nubian king and took off his head with his hands, and then sailed home with his body hanging on the ship's prow. He wanted to intimidate his rivals and potentially rebels from messing with him ever again. However, this stunt caused more problems as it led to multiple battles and wars. During the rules of monarchs, cults were formed to worship them, and Thutmose I's cult lasted for centuries after his death, which is an unusual occurrence, and this statue of monarch is at the heart of a tableau representing offerings and ceremonies in his honor. Number 3. Akhenaten. Egyptians had many gods, but for Akhenaten, he said, we're going to have one god, and it is the one I can only worship. Aten, the god of sun, is meant to major upheaval on how Egypt was run and took a lot of work to do it. So much in fact that he literally worked his people to death. He built a whole new city in honor of this god, moved 20,000 people there and had them built it no matter how badly their bodies ached. These people had to push through everything. Based on the bones in the town cemetery, more than 2/3 of his workers broke a bone while they were working, and a good 1/3 of them broke their spines. The people were barely fed, and almost every person in the town was malnourished, and they were not allowed to do anything about it. If they broke rank and tried to snatch a little something extra, they were sentenced to be repeatedly poked with a sharp object. And that was all for nothing. As soon as Akhenaten died, everything he did was destroyed, and his very name was erased from Egyptian history. Number 2. Ramses II. Ramses lived so long that people started getting seriously worried that he might not never die. In a time when most kings got assassinated within their first few years, Ramses II lived up to 91 years old. He enjoyed his time alive too. Right up to the very end, he built more statues and monuments than anyone ever, and he slept with more women than anyone ever too. By the time he died, Ramses II had at least 100 children with at least 9 wives, and it took a lot of sleeping with women to get there, but he made sure he put those hours in. When he invaded Kedah, he refused to sign a peace treaty unless they handed over their eldest daughter, and he did not shy away from his daughters either. He married at least 3 of his own kids, including his firstborn. Number 1. The Ptolemy Pharaohs. Finally, at number 1, we have the Ptolemy Pharaohs. This family of mad kings are definitely on this list. Starting with Ptolemy IV, he eliminated his mother, who got rid of his dad for having an affair with her mom, which is his grandma, and then Ptolemy IV married his sister and then got rid of her after her husband brother's death. Are you with me so far? Because there's more. Ptolemy VI fought his brother Ptolemy V for the throne and married his sister Cleopatra II, and then Ptolemy VII was killed by his uncle, where Ptolemy VIII married Cleopatra II, but then he had an affair with her daughter Cleopatra III. Then she killed her sister Cleopatra IV and was later got by her widowed brother-in-law. I'm gonna go fast forward a bit because there's a lot of back and forth with the different Ptolemies and Cleopatras until we get to the one that we know. Cleopatra VII. As we know in history, that Cleopatra was the last ruler of Egypt. Basically, her father, Ptolemy XII, decapitated her sister because she hated him, and eventually Cleopatra VII had to marry her brother, got rid of him, married the other brother, and then also got rid of him, and then her sister dragged her through the streets of Rome as a prisoner because of Julius Caesar, and had her sister sacrificed at a temple because of her other lover, Mark Antony. These are terrible people and are definitely insane. Some were not too mad, some were just ambitious leaders with great desires to rule, and others were just insane. After all, we could only gather so much from what we know from history, especially from these times. So what was your favorite on the list? Did you learn anything interesting today? Let me know. Alright, your next riddle. Are you ready? I am an odd number, take away a letter, and I become even. What am I? Be sure to put your answer in the comments below and I'll reveal the answer in the next video, top 10 haunted places in the Philippines banned to the public. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jessa. Be sure to like and subscribe and I'll see your beautiful faces in the next one. Bye!